In previous episode, we had spoken about the shadow self and we discussed the different wounding themes of consciousness. And for this episode, I would be going into the healing themes of consciousness. In the inner workbook, they give us healing for each of these wounding themes, and you start to see how for every wounding theme, there is a healing theme associated with it. First, I would discuss the healing themes separately, and I would go into how each wounding theme of consciousness can be mapped or connected with the healing theme of consciousness. And then I'll just discuss that as well as the flow of, the wounding. So the idea is that for every wounding theme of consciousness, there is like a scale. So you have from rejection to insecurity. And as you heal, you go upward on the scale. So there is like a transition of some sort. And I will just discuss that from my own perspective. So, hi, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's nice that you joined me again. It's perspective here. And with the healing theme of consciousness, and I'm just going to list them out, we have accountability, which is the first one. And then from accountability, we move to ease. From ease, we move to self motivation, to acceptance, and finally understanding. So we have five healing themes of consciousness, right? Remember the different aspects we had spoken about before. For the healing, you have like the archetype, right, which just represents a persona or an archetype that embodies that particular theme of consciousness. And I would put that up. So you have the archetype, you have the emotions, you have the root program, you have how to access this theme, you have what it's working on. You also have the thoughts and values. I think you have approaches to challenges and so on and so forth. Again, I would put that up there. So first, we have accountability. Now, coming from insecurity, we find the need to start to take accountability for our actions, right? And the theme of accountability focuses primarily on self honesty, on courage to face the previous wounding, courage to face shortcomings, right? And then we're able to be honest with ourselves because, like I spoke about previously, just as each of these woundings were passed on to us and we identified ourselves with them, we started perpetuating actions from a place of wounding, and then we also hurt people, right? That's what the saying, hurt people, right? And having this in mind, there is a need to take accountability because truly, at this point, we've not been the best versions of ourselves, right? At this point, I mean, all is in the becoming, don't get me wrong. I am of the strong opinion that everyone is doing the best that they can. But when you start taking accountability in hopes that you heal your wounding, with hopes that you start walking into the higher themes of consciousness, the idea is that you're seeing yourself truly for who you are. You're seeing those wounded parts, you're seeing the negativity that you have perpetuated. And so with the accountability, you're able to be honest with yourself. You're able to, you know, look at those things that you've done for what they are. And that's why courage is associated with that. So for accountability, I think for accountability, it is the honest warrior or something like that. But the idea is that you're able to start to be honest with yourself. And that takes a lot of courage because remember, we're coming from a place of wounding. And for you to now even decide to see yourself truly, it takes a lot of courage. So that is what accountability works on. And accountability is still very much in the theme of that external metrics. That's how I see it. So with accountability, you're outsourcing the metrics that you use to measure yourself, which is fine because at that stage we're still trying to even get our foot in, right? And so the first step is to be accountable. Judgment that is positive, judgment that is channeled in the right direction, right? So you have an idea of what is a perceived good and a perceived bad, right? And then you're able to truly be honest with yourself. Like, are my actions good? Are my actions bad? Am I doing the right things? Am I holding myself accountable? Just seeing yourself basically, right? And that essentially is the major idea of accountability. But as you move up to the scale, which is towards ease, it gets tiring, right? Holding yourself accountable every time, confronting, facing your past denials, like things that you were in denial of before, your past insecurities, your past wounding, facing all of these things takes courage, and it gets exhausting, right? Because over and over again there's always something to, in quotes, contend with. There's always something to address. Again, all is in the becoming, we're ever evolving. So even as literally just before I filmed this message, I had to take accountability for my actions as well, right? And it's continuous. But at this point, you're so fixated on, like, oh my God, I'm trying to move myself forward. I'm trying to get rid of this negativity. You're so passionate, you're so courageous, you're so ready to move forward. And accountability comes with a lot of seeing yourself clearly for what you've been doing. And not only is it like, the current things that you're going through, it's also the things that you have done in times past, right? Because think about it, if you've been operating from a place of wounding, then definitely you've accumulated a lot of hurts that you've passed on to people. And so at some point it does get tiring, it does get like a lot, it becomes a lot. And that's why we move into ease, right? Because ease is more neutral. What this theme represents is neutrality, is neither here nor there. At the point of ease, you're not trying to pick, okay, is this right? Is this wrong? You're just chilling. You have that feeling that, oh, life will take care of itself. Everything is happening in its own time. And with ease, it makes sense because up until now you've been taking accountability of everything that you're doing. And so over and over again, you're seeing yourself, and it does get tiring. And I like to think about these dynamics like a polarity type of thing, right? And this is also me introducing these concepts to you guys because these are things that I'll be discussing going forward as well in other episodes. So when we talk about polarity, we talk about rhythm, right? And life in itself has rhythms. And that's very interesting because the more you're aware of these concepts, the more you're aware of these underlining interworkings, you just start seeing things differently. So, say for instance, in nature, you have seasons, right? So, you have the spring, you have the summer, the fall, and the winter. And so everything changes, and it goes from this to that to this to that. In that same line, you can think about it like a polarity, and there's a rhythm. You're not going to have one thing constantly. You're going to move from one end to another end, and on and on and on like that. So when we think of even these themes of consciousness, in a sense, there is polarity at play, right? You're moving from one pole to another pole. You're moving from one end to another end, however you want to reference that as. But especially when it comes to these healing themes, you also see that at play. Again, just like nature, we we are of nature, so we behave very similar to nature. And you can't always be doing. You have to rest, right? That is very natural. You can't always be producing, producing, producing. If you keep doing that, you would you would max out at some point. So rest is very essential. And you rest, when you rest, you go back out again, you work, you come back, you rest, you go back, you work, like that, like that. And that in itself is a rhythm, right? You go from working to resting, you go from one pole to the other pole. And so when we think about the idea of healing as well, it gets exhausting that we're constantly looking for things to pick apart. And that's what accountability does. Accountability has a record of all your wrongdoings, and it's like, okay, now you have to take note of this and take note of that and hold yourself accountable here and there and there, and it becomes tiring. And you're gonna get stuck. And that's the thing about these healing themes, right? We see that there's a progression and there's a need to elevate, there's a need to go up in the scale. And just as much as the vision or the goal is for us to go up in scale, we could also get stuck, right? And that's all a choice. And that's something that the book also sheds light on, triggers that keep us stuck. That's another aspect of the healing themes. So it already points out to the fact that, okay, whilst you are in this specific healing theme of consciousness, there is a need for you to think beyond that, because there is a goal, which is true freedom and happiness. But if you're so bent on perpetuating actions that are in line of this particular theme of consciousness, healing theme, then that could keep you stuck. And when you think about accountability and always trying to, face your past shortcomings, when you're trying to be hold yourself accountable, hold other people accountable, you know, when you keep doing that, it could become extreme and you just stay stuck in holding accountable. And at the end of the day, that is not what is going to give you that freedom and happiness. That wouldn't give you that inner peace that we seek. So the idea is, yes, you want to be accountable. Yes, you want to face your shortcomings by all means. But at some point, it's okay to retreat. And then that retreat looks like the neutral level. Because I mean, of course, if we've been going so hard, we've been going, 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 it only makes sense for us to want to, swing back into neutrality, just like I said with nature. So the neutral point is ease, and ease says, Omar, I've been taking accountability. I've been looking at myself. I'm tired. I'm good. Like at this point, yeah, I'm good, right? So that's ease, and ease is very much of the vibes like, oh, I'm just chill. I'm not trying to do too much. I'm doing enough, but like anything that is too extreme, I'm good. Um, ease also thinks of, oh, life will sort itself out, everything is working as it should, just that kind of energy, right? And that's perfect because at this point we are in our resting phase, and that's good. It's good to rest, it's good to take time out, but you can't stay stuck in ease either, right? If you're again too, ooh, I'm just chilling, then how would you evolve even further? How would you go up the scale even more? Again, our destination is true freedom and happiness. So how do we get there if we're at ease, right? There has to be more. So we we go again, right? And this it's interesting because in my own experience, let me just share this. The way that I read this book, I read it for an extended period of time. I literally took my time reading this book. I would read the book and, go the another couple of days or a week and actually just observe how I'm able to make this knowledge practical. So all the knowledge that I have gathered from the previous chapter I read, how do I actually like put it into practicality? How do I put it into my life and observe how that plays out for me, and then use that knowledge to inform my further reading? So in a way, it was like I wasn't just reading the book, I was applying it, I was making it practical as I was reading. So it was a very interesting experience, the way that I approached it. So when I got to accountability, right, I was very much like, oh wow, yeah, by all means, we're ready, we're fired up, we're getting there, we're looking at ourselves now. And funny enough, after accountability, I literally did not open the book for a good minute. Like I was like, oh yeah, I've been fighting my demons literally. I've been facing my shadows, I've been holding myself accountable, I've been dissecting all these different layers, and at this point, yeah, I'm good. I felt like I had arrived. When I got to accountability, I felt like I had arrived. And so it was very interesting that the next time I picked up the book, I was literally at ease. Like that was that was the theme of consciousness that popped up for me, ease. And I just felt so called out because that was the that was what I was embodying, right? I was like, okay, yeah, I'm good, I'm chilling. It was just smooth. I'm like, oh yeah, I've arrived. I'm taking accountability. I have nothing to, it's whatever. Like I'm doing what I should be doing, right? And it made sense at the time because I was coming from a place of wounding and all of that. And remember that the I'll call it the lowest theme of consciousness was rejection, right? And that's the feeling of being unlovable. And I already shared that this was a theme that I was heavily in. So for the most part, the goal that I always had was to, have get that love. And the way that I thought to get the love was through external sources. And I just felt that there was something external that would give me that love, right? And just being able to do, perform, you know, to get the love. So as an accountability, I'm still doing, and looking for things to contend with. So it just made sense flowing from that wounding phase to accountability. It felt like, oh, finally, finally, I had something to do that was now in a positive light. All this while I had been doing, but it was more like, still within the negative context, or what we would see as the wounding context. But now, oh, I'm finally in a place where I'm actually doing things, and I'm doing it for a positive regard. And so it felt very familiar, but it's still connected and still tied to that external metric, that external perception of what is right and what is wrong, and how to still move forward from that place. So yeah, and because I had done that and that felt like, oh, I had achieved so much, I just wanted to relax. Like I felt I had arrived at accountability, and flipping the pages and, seeing ease, I felt really called out because, yeah, after that, I was chilling. I was chilling. But it's interesting because, again, we show up the way nature shows up, and it was not a crazy thing that I ended up being at ease. But yet again, there's a need to ask ourselves, is this all that is possible? And, you know, there's also a pattern that I noticed, right? And I'll discuss this at the end so that I would have explained other healing themes of consciousness, and then I'll just circle back at this. But yeah, to transcend the neutral vibes, to transcend the ease theme of consciousness, we have to ask ourselves, is this all that is possible? Don't we want to do better? Don't we want to move forward in our lives? Do we just want to be there? Is there more to it? Is there a way that my own unique imprint, like how do I push that forward, right? And so from ease, we move on to self motivation. So again, self motivation takes us back outside. Like, okay, let's get to work, let's get stuff done. Remember, with accountability, we were getting stuff done. We were trying to right all our wrongs. We're trying to right all our wrongs, but it was still based off the understanding or perception of, from an external POV, like the world, like, okay, what is good and what is bad, right? But with self motivation, we are asking ourselves, what do we genuinely want to do, right? What is our passion? What are our strengths? How do we pursue our uniqueness? So it's coming from a place of inner motivation. And yeah, that's why self motivation is self motivation, because we're coming from that place. And, you know, we're not, because we've been able to hold ourselves accountable. We know what it feels like to truly see ourselves, to face our own shortcomings. And so even we faced our own shortcomings, and we've also been fine not facing our shortcomings. So we have that balance of some sort. And I think that's also something I admire about how, they put forth these different themes of consciousness, healing themes of consciousness. We had to do the work, and then we came back to just be at ease. And that already creates this balance, because we've tasted accountability and wanting to keep holding ourselves accountable, which you can see as one end or one extreme. And then we've also tasted ease and wanting to just be at ease. But at some point, that gets tiring, right? And so, because we've been able to experience those two sides, we can strike a balance for ourselves, right? We have an understanding of what it means to be on those two sides. So, with self motivation, we're saying, okay, now I truly want to move forward, but I can't move forward from a place of constantly trying to fix myself like something is broken, right? How is the best way and the most effective and efficient way to channel my energy, to channel my vision of, this healed version of self? And that is self motivation. Self motivation says, okay, oh, how can I explore my full potential as an individual, mastering my gifts, my unique abilities? Like, what can I do to just explore myself to full potential? And like I said, self motivation is coming from that inner space of self and exploring personal potential. It's not holding yourself accountable to external standards. So you've experienced that, and you know what that feels like, and you've also found a balance with ease. And then now you're coming to the point where you genuinely are coming from a place of exploring your own uniqueness, exploring your own potential, which is very important, because remember, we are coming from a place of wounding. So in a way, we've been told what to do. The world has set a standard for us. We've been influenced by our environment in the biggest to the most subtle ways. And at this point, we are now truly exploring what it means like to be our own unique self. And if you remember from the very first episode, when I was talking about the I mentioned the I being the true self, right? And being that authentic self. So at this point, we are starting to explore our authenticity, which is very important. It is very important because, like I said, the world had been defining who we were up until this point. So, very, very interesting point. Like, I love the theme of self motivation. So, yeah. So self motivation says, oh, how can I explore my full potential? What else is possible for me to achieve as an individual? How do I master my own unique gifts? But the shortcoming to self motivation is that self motivation is attached to outcomes. So because you're putting in effort, you are exploring your potential, you're going above and beyond, you're doing all that you can possibly do. When there is a will, there is a way. You're so passionate, you want to go, 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 go. You have all these goals, you're so inspired. But there is that attachment to outcome. And again, you're still focused on the external because you're not in control of the outcomes. So what happens when you put in the effort, you're so passionate about this, you've spent so much time, you've mastered your gifts, you're still mastering your abilities, your skills, you're adding to your toolbox. You spend so much time and effort doing these things. And then, oh, maybe you put something out there and nobody responds, nobody comments, nobody likes, the engagement is very low, or the response you're getting, maybe you apply for something and it's like no callback, So self motivation would feel hurt. Self motivation would feel bad that after all this effort that I have put in, after going above and beyond, after doing the most, because I bet you self motivation does the most, right? It's so motivated and not from an external place. So already it's very pumped up. After going above and beyond, this is what I get, right? So that can keep you stuck in self motivation. You could always be, finding a need to like show yourself over and over again. And remember, our goal is true freedom and lasting happiness. And if that is our goal, we can't focus on the external, because the external is constantly changing and we cannot predict the external, we cannot control the external. So we can only put in effort, and the outcome is left to the world, how the world sees it. And how the world sees it is so different from how we see it, because we're our own unique selves. So if I'm coming from a place of self motivation, coming from a place of my uniqueness, and then I put stuff out there, I would not expect that the world would perceive it in the exact same way that I would perceive it. So self motivation has a shortcoming, which is attachment to outcomes. And now to transcend, or to go up again in the scale from self motivation, we have to remove every attachment we have to outcomes, which is crazy, I know. But that's necessary, right? And that's where acceptance comes in.